Griff Rhys Jones, and I'm standing right in the centre of an area that was first laid out in the 1660s. It was the very earliest piazza to be called a square. It's Bloomsbury Square, and it set a sort of template, because as London expanded into its new suburbs here, they did so by grouping houses around a little stretch of countryside. And the idea was a classical tradition of rus in urbe, the countryside in the town. It's resulted in some of the most delightful, distinctive, unique, peaceful urban developments in the world. And the earliest of these characteristic London squares are right here in the Bloomsbury area. In fact, I can see another one just up there. And I wonder if you'd like to join me on a short tour of a few of these vitally important heritage assets. What could be better on this glorious sunny day than to traverse historic London via these oases of greenery? Isn't this wonderful? This is Russell Square. It was laid out as a garden just after the 1800s by Humphrey Repton, who was Britain's foremost garden designer, because they wanted a garden here, originally private for all the houses that lined the square, and in fact there were gates that used to stop the hoi polloi even coming into the streets around it. But now it's available to everyone. This area used to be known as Judgeland because of all the legal people, the bigwigs, literally bigwigs, who came to live around here. As far as the aristocracy was concerned, it was too far outside central London, a sort of wilderness compared with Mayfair. But as a result, it filled up with the up-and-coming, with the nouveau. If we look over in that direction, we can see the splendid old Russell Hotel. Now, that extraordinary hotel was designed in a sort of French Gothic fashion at the turn of the 20th century by the architect, the house architect for Lord Russell, called Charles Fitzroy Dole. And many of the other houses matched the terracotta feature by having terracotta features of their own. And that was the origin of the phrase, to get your house dolled up. To the west is Bedford Square, which allows us to get an idea of what the squares were like in their early days. It's the best preserved of them all. Grand houses, joined in a long terrace, built to look like the front of a single palatial building. Open space, no trees round the outside of the gardens, so that the residents could see into the interior of the square. Railings and locked gates still allow entry for key holders only. These railings are the original ones. They escaped the drive to take down railings for melting during the Second World War. To the north are Gordon Square and Tavistock Square, side by side. Gordon Square is university land, with tiny Woburn Square opposite. In a corner of the garden, you'll find the memorial to Noor Inayat Khan, believed to be the first of an Asian woman in Britain. She lived by the square before going as a radio operator to occupied France, where she was betrayed and shot. She was posthumously awarded the George Cross. I can also find here the head of Rabindranath Tagore, the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, who had briefly studied at UCL. Right next door is Tavistock Square, which invites quiet meditation on the many national and international memorials that have found a place here. From a cherry tree planted to remember the victims of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, a memorial to conscientious objectors, and Mahatma Gandhi, a former student at the university who has a prominent place in the centre of the square. It's impossible to come in here without feeling that you've discovered a hidden secret. This is St George's Gardens, and the nature of it becomes clear as you walk on in. The tombstones here tell us that this was one of London's first cemeteries that was not in the actual grounds of a church. Thomas Cromwell's granddaughter is buried here, and also Zachary Macaulay. He was the father of Thomas Babington Macaulay, the famous historian. But Zachary had worked on a plantation in Jamaica as a young man, and as a result, he spent the rest of his life working tirelessly with William Wilberforce for abolition. About 150 years ago, the cemetery fell into disuse. It was decided to open it as a public garden because it was felt that many of the squares that we've looked at were private and unavailable to ordinary working people. The woman who did this was called Octavia Hill, and she was instrumental in founding the National Trust. For a long time, cemeteries were in fact the only open space that the poor of London enjoyed. Well, we've very quickly skirted Mecklenburgh Square and we've come here to the top of Quorums Fields. They were named for Captain Quorum, who in 1739 was so upset by the number of destitute children here in the city of London that he founded the Foundling Hospital to act as an orphanage for them. He did this with the aid of the great and the good. Handel, for example, used to give an annual performance of the Messiah in order to raise money. And Hogarth donated a number of beautiful pictures and persuaded other artists to do the same. And you can still see those in the Foundling Museum, which is just in front of me here. This goes on today because this is a little symbol of loss that was made by Tracy Emin. Nearby Queen's Square has a medical reputation nowadays, being the site of several hospitals, including Great Ormond Street. Park Health has become a bit of a watchword in the last few years, with people using these spaces for jogging and yoga. I saw that. I've even seen quite a lot of tree bathing today. But I think perhaps most importantly for those of us who live in this area, they represent a way of achieving mental well-being. They soothe us, they pacify us, they uplift us. Exploring these fabulous London squares, these fabulous Bloomsbury squares, you would imagine that nobody could disagree with the idea that they are a precious legacy that needs to be preserved. And yet, they are under threat all the time. They're under threat not just from benign neglect, but also from lack of funds to maintain them. They experience a lot of wear and tear. They need your support.